BBC Radio Lincolnshire.
My first job at 15 years old was working at Maud Foster Mill in Boston. I loved it. The creaky machinery, the flowery aroma, and yes, the endless stairs I had to clean. But all that combined to make it feel like you're stepping into history. But of course, it's not just the Maud Foster Mill which fascinates me. Lincolnshire as a whole has a love affair with windmills. At one point, there were over 600 flour mills and hundreds of windmills operating water pumps in the county. And today, there are more windmills here which still work than in any other county in the UK. In this programme, I'll be embarking on a windmill tour of Lincolnshire. We'll hear how you go about putting sails back on a broken windmill, and from one of the few men who can still do it.
You know, once you've done something like this, it's a great feeling sort of thing, so I look forward to coming to work every day.
We'll hear of catastrophes and how millers cope with them.
I got an anguished phone call from the lady who works in my tea rooms to say that the mill had been damaged, so I immediately did a U-turn and whipped back and greeted by the scene of total devastation. It was as if a bomb had hit it.
We'll hear of a rarity unique to the county.
We've not heard of any other brewery that uses a windmill for milling its grain.
There'll be understandably enthusiastic volunteers.
A windmill, it's a living thing. You know, it's like a car that doesn't work. You know, it's just not the same.
It looks absolutely wonderful, and do come and see it, because we are the only one
in the world
that works.
And we'll find out just what Sonia Hundal is talking about.
But I have to say, mine is bigger than Jamie Oliver's, okay?
I'm Harry Parkhill, and this is the Windmills of Lincolnshire. It's Tuesday the 11th of July and it's about 9:30 on this grisly, drizzly grey morning. I'm standing on Mill Road looking at Ellis Windmill, although it doesn't really look much like a windmill at the moment. It's basically just the tower and no sails, but as you can hear rumbling away in the background, we've got two lorries, one with what looks like some kind of crane and another with a cherry picker on it, and of course what I'm here to see today, two sails for Ellis Windmill. The mill itself has been without a sail for about 5-6 months. The traditional millwright found that they were damaged and they needed replacing, so he's went away, beavering away in his workshop, and now they're here to put them on, and as I speak, a crane is just moving around to lift those sails into place on this windmill that was built in 1798.
Hi, I'm Neil Medcalf of Traditional Millwrights.
Traditional Millwright, and we've just seen the flatbed truck reverse into Mill Road for starters. That must have been quite a manoeuvre.
Yeah, we have to put signs out to stop people parking opposite the gates and that sort of thing, but to be honest, the people around here have been really good. Every time we put a sign out, they've left it clear so we can get in and out.
We've got two sails on the truck. Just tell me a little bit about the sails. How long are they? How heavy are they?
They're about 36 foot long. They weigh about a tonne each sort of thing. We took all four off. We knew one was a little bit dodgy because we'd seen it before. But then when we got into them, we found two of them was beyond repair, to be honest. So just to get the mill back and working again, we've brought the two original ones back that we've painted and done a few repairs on them kind of thing. We're going to put two on today and then go away and build two brand new sails for them, which will take, I don't know, that'll take about a month each, I suppose, to build sort of thing.
And those sails, you say it could take a couple of hours each to put them on?
They'll be about an hour and a half sort of thing to put each one. Yeah, as long as it all goes all right sort of thing. We've had all the shackles and everything, you know, we've cleaned them all up sort of thing, so it shouldn't be too bad, hopefully.
It's quite a complex task. You've got your crane here, with traditional millwright crane specifically.
That's the cherry picker, that is. That's so we can get up and work on the sails kind of thing. Originally, we would have just done it out of the front door sort of thing, but seeing we've got a cherry picker here, it seems we may as well use it. Because it's a right-sized windmill, basically, you know. I mean, the thing is, it's on a ledge kind of thing, so it catches the wind, so it doesn't need to be any taller than it is, really. I mean, I know there's a lot of houses around it now, but it still catches the wind most of the time, sort of thing, yeah.
And these two sails, once they're on, it'll actually be able to turn, which will be the first time in how many months?
I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I suppose.
4 or 5 months.
Yeah, it'll work perfectly well on two sails, sort of thing. As long as you put them opposite each other, it's balanced. So yeah.
Yeah, so don't get that wrong. Don't put one in one corner and then one next one. And in terms of the, because obviously you're a traditional mill, right? It's your full-time living. And who's paying to replace these sails?
Lincolnshire County Council. The mill is owned by Lincolnshire County Council, kind of thing. So yeah, they're the ones. Yeah, but I mean, we go all over the country doing it, sort of thing. Because, like you say, it is a specialist job, and there's windmills dotted around the country, so you've got to be willing to travel. I mean, this is a nice local one for us. We live about an hour away from here, sort of thing. So it is a really nice mill to work on. This one is, yeah. It's been a really good job actually. This one has, yeah.
And do you mind me asking how much the county council pay for this sort of thing?
I think it's about 60-odd thousand, sort of thing. And that includes.
Is that for all 4 sails?
That's all 4 sails. That includes decoration of the mill as well, because that was what we started out, was just to paint the mill to start with, kind of thing. But it had been left for so long that we thought, well, it'd be easy to take the sails off and repair them, kind of thing. So it'll be like a brand new mill by the time we finish, sort of thing, all freshly decorated. And it's looking really nice at the minute. Last week I tarred the tower, kind of thing, so that looks good, yeah.
Yeah, it looks spick and span. So shall I let you get on with it?
Yes, I better go do some work now.
You can't let your colleagues do all the work?
No, not really.
So after some manoeuvring with the crane on the back of the truck, the sail is now in the vertical position, and I can just see the millwright adjusting what's called the cloth on the sails. Now, the cloth is what they call the flaps on the sail that you close and open to allow for the wind to be caught by the sails. It's called the cloth because back in the early days of windmills, of course, it was made out of cloth so that they can hoist it up on the mill on the very top prong of this crossbar on the mill. It's fascinating to see these guys at work because they clearly know exactly what they're doing. Very professional. This is the first of only 2 sails to put on the 4-sailed mill, but at least that'll be enough to get it going. That was traditional millwright Neil Medcarth talking to me at Ellis Mill in Lincoln. We'll hear how he got on with reassembling the mill later in the programme. But now, we're nearly a quarter of an hour into this special on windmills, and you may be asking questions about them. What are they? How do they work? Well, the first is easy. They harness the wind to turn grain into flour. Simple. The second, a little bit more complicated, but don't worry. I've been to the windmill which stoked my fascination of them, the Maud Foster Mill in Boston. Let's take you on a tour. To understand how a windmill works, you basically have to start from the top and work your way down, which means a bit of a walk up some stairs first. Floor 1. Oh, I'm right at the top now. I'm standing underneath the moving machinery of the Maud Foster. Just hear the sound of that creaking machinery. It's certainly not going fast today. It's a breezy day, but not gusty enough to get it really rocketing around. But I can tell you, I've been up here when it really is rocketing round, and you can hear the whole building rumble. You can feel it shake. I'm standing in front of a big rope, and it's attached to a pipe. That pipe is pulled down by the rope, and at the end it pivots up and pushes a wooden beam. That wooden beam pushes a cog onto a big driving gear, which is being turned by the sails as we speak. That turns the chains, which means you can lift those sacks of grain right to the top. So, we've got our sack of the grain at the top of the windmill. Now we need to send it all the way back down again, and hopefully at the bottom it'll be flour. So there's some chutes here to my side. You tip the grain into that, and you head down. So I'm standing in a room now. It's the stone floor. Above me is a big red metal gear, and that is turning 2 millstones. Both of them have a slow trickle of grain from the grain storage bins on the floor above them, dribbling down onto the stones to be crushed beneath the 2 stones. The top stone turns, the bottom stone stays still. The pattern's drawn on these stones so that it cuts the grains in half and gets that flour out. Let's go down to the next floor and see the product. Just stepping down to the balcony floor now. I'm going to quickly have a wander around the balcony and then I'll come back to the flour that's being made. So, standing out on the balcony of the Maud Foster Mill now, walking around, you can almost touch the sails as they go past. It's a beautiful sight. Just to quickly explain a little bit about what you're seeing when you can see a windmill. I'm standing on the opposite side of the sails now, so the sails are on the other side of the mill. On the back, it's got a fantail. You may have seen this. You've got the big sails on the front, in this case 5 for the Maud Foster, and you've got a little tiny one on the back that rotates quicker, it seems, at some times, and that is turning the whole top of the windmill around to face the wind. If the wind's coming from the wrong direction, everything goes backwards and it causes all sorts of problems. So this fantail, which is spinning now, just fine-tuning the top of the mill, rotates a little gear that I can see slowly moving there, and that turns the whole top, the whole cap of the windmill around to face the wind. Ingenious. Now, can you hear this? This is flour that we've just heard being ground upstairs, trickling into a bag. So that's whole grain flour. That's going into straight from the grain, straight into the bag. But what about this one? I'm looking into a chute that's firing little sprinkles of flour down. It's wholemeal flour, it's the whole lot. That, on the next floor, is going to be sifted, and that's done by a machine called a dressing machine. So that is the next step down. It's a big machine that's was previously driven by the power of the wind itself, but is now often driven by a motor. And that sifts using loads of different levels of fineness of material, and that sifts it, just like a normal sieve in your kitchen, from the wholemeal down to the bran and the white flour itself. And then, the last floor. This one smells so fantastic, this floor, because this is where all of the flour comes out into the big bags, big paper bags, saying stone ground flour, organic from the Maud Foster Mill here in Boston. And you can sniff this room and you can smell flour that's just kind of ingrained in the wood. It's such a potent smell. And it comes out of these big chutes here after being sifted by that dressing machine on the floor above. And that is how a traditional windmill works. Still to come on the programme, the carnage after a windmill had its sails destroyed in a storm, the only brewery in the country using windmill ground barley, and we'll find out exactly what Sonia from Frisney has, which is much bigger than Jamie Oliver's.
BBC Radio Lincolnshire.
For many years now, the 8-sailed mill in Heckington has been a landmark for travellers passing between Sleaford and Boston. I know it always gives me a smile when I drive past it, but unbeknownst to so many of those commuters, the windmill's surrounding buildings have been undergoing a transformation with the help of a huge grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Last week, the final touches were being made to the new visitor centre. I went for a sneak peek with Miller Jim Bailey.
What we're looking at is the granary, but in front of it is the piggeries. There were piggeries here. We have photographs of that building from the 1980s, which gives us the form of the building. It was almost completely demolished, but we have now rebuilt it back to its old shape. But because these aren't original walls, it has modern style doors that open, allowing light into the granary behind it.
The last time that I went in, you could only go into the mill building itself, the tower, and the sort of the shop was in there and everything else. But now I'm sensing the idea that there might be more.
That's right. We're now following the route that the majority of our visitors will go. So we're opening the doors into the piggeries, and in the background you can hear children that are here on a visit.
Fantastic.
So That decoration is very particular to windmilling because it shows the sayings that are in our language today that come from milling. So I'm reading, keep your nose to the grindstone, 3 sheets to the wind, shut your trap, separating the wheat from the chaff. These are all sayings, all to do with milling, and the explanation is written below.
What a fantastic idea to walk in and be introduced to milling terminology. It gets you in the mindset, doesn't it?
It does, exactly that, and it reminds us how much or how important milling was to the local community, and so these terms have just slipped into our language.
Should we head into the mill itself, and then I'll ask you a bit about the history of the windmill, because as you've been saying, it's 8 sails. We have so many different sailed windmills, but 8 seems like it's almost kind of showing off.
In 1850, there were 15,000 working windmills in this country. Only 7 were ever built with 8 sails. An 8-sail windmill will mill in a slightly lighter wind than a 4 or a 5-sail windmill. Is it financially viable to spend all that extra money on 8 sails where 4 or 5 would do? In truth, we don't think it is. And so it is most likely because of the cost of doing that to make 8-sail windmills not particularly popular. It's not a good investment.
But it looks great.
It looks absolutely wonderful. And do come and see it, because we are the only one
In the world.
in the world that works. We'll walk all the way up, and then I'll look at the wind.
It's my favourite bit, hearing, let's walk all the way up. Let's step out onto the balcony
We're
then.
on the balcony now. I think it's worth a try. I think we'll go up into the cab and I'll get her ready to go. I won't guarantee that she's going to turn. It is very marginal whether the wind is strong enough, but I've got 8 sails there, so let's see if they'll go.
See if we can get her working. So this is we're in the cap of the windmill now, basically.
We're in the cap, so we're bending down because head height here is very limited.
Oh, you can feel the creaky floor. It's wonderful. It's exciting, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, after all these years, it still excites me, and I'm now going to get it going.
Get her going. So just to describe what we've got here, we've got 2 large, very large gears. In front of me, we've got the one that's standing on its, well, I suppose it's standing vertically, and that's being turned, well, hopefully it'll be turned by the sails, and that then attaches to the one that drives the main sail,
That's
the
right.
main
and
mill
then
down.
below us we can see the vertical shaft going down, which of course drives the millstones.
So that's the brake rope that you're holding there.
And I'm simply going to feed it out through the side of the cap, because then I can operate the brake from down on the balcony. And we can hear it rattling away now.
Quite a high-tech bit of kit there, that mallet.
Well, yes.
So now all we need is a bit of wind.
Bit of wind, yes. And as I said earlier, no guarantees.
No guarantees, of course. Back on the balcony, so brakes are off.
So I'm now going to close the shutters.
And we can see the shutters
Understand.
slowly closing.
Right, those are shutters fully closed, and the sails aren't turning.
Should we all give it a blow?
And then we'll give it a blow.
Oh, so you've just given it a push. And it is turning slowly.
She'll go.
She's going. Oh, look at that. So all it needs is a little bit of a push.
Yes, it's a miller's bump start.
There you go.
There we go.
And now the sails are gracefully passing us by. Fantastic. What a sight. You can see on the rooftops, we can see the silhouette of those turning sails, which just, it's just fantastic, that. And of course, when we go back in, everything will slowly start rumbling, won't it?
That's right, yeah.
The new visitor centre for the 8-sailed mill at Heckington is now open from 12 till 5 every day throughout the summer holidays. I'd highly recommend visiting. Later we'll catch up with how the sails were returned to Ellis Mill and Lincoln. But of course, Ellis Mill was lucky, in a sense. Its sails were condemned before anything disastrous happened. But Mervyn Austin, miller at Mount Pleasant Windmill in Curtin-in-Lindsey near Gainsborough, wasn't quite so lucky. Right now we can hear the sort of the rumbling, that evocative sound of the stones turning and the gears and the cogs driving. But outside, if we just look out the window, a step over here, we can see the cap of the mill and the sails are in the backyard. We just start by telling me What happened to the sales in the first place?
Well, we had a storm on the 29th of November 2015 called Storm Clodagh. It was Sunday afternoon. Basically what happened, the wind was blowing from the southwest, and there's what we call a wind shear. It went round sort of like a tornado and went completely the opposite way and blew from the northeast, which caused the mill to spin, the cap to spin. The wind then obviously went back to the southwest and forced the sails off the mill, broke the iron cross in the centre, which had been there since 1875, snapped it clean off. The two top sails came down and wrecked the other two sails that were below them, and that was basically the end of our sails.
So it's been nearly 2 years since they've been off?
Yeah. So consequently, we've got quite a job to restore it back to its pristine condition that it was in the first place.
And how did you feel when you saw the sails come off? I mean, were you there? Did you see it happening?
I'd just gone down the road in my van for about half a mile away, but I got an anguished phone call from the lady who works in my tea rooms to say that the mill had been damaged. So I immediately did a U-turn and whipped back, and greeted by the scene of total devastation. It was as if a bomb had hit it.
Oh, really? So what, the sails had completely come off?
Well, they'd completely come off and they were on the ground. Fortunately, there was nobody hurt. There was damage to one of my customers' cars, unfortunately. But other than that, we were lucky.
Yeah, lucky.
If it had been earlier, we could have killed somebody, you know.
It's a scary thought, because they weigh a ton each, don't they, these sails?
Ton and a quarter, yeah. I found the fan boards, some of them were 200 yards out in the field opposite. One went through my neighbour's roof, and the other one smacked into a fence on the other side.
Wow. So yeah, quite a storm.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of damage.
But as we hear, the stones are still turning. How do you get the mill to work, even though you don't have the sails turning every day?
Well, I was forced to put an electric motor in there, which has caused some problems in terms of the fact that I've now got a motor driving a very small cock that's driving a very large cock, which is then driving another small cock, if you can get that, which is driving the stones. So it means I can go about a third of the speed I would under wind power. So it's just too many cocks, basically.
On the first floor of the mill now. So this is where the flour comes from the stones above us and down into this big flour bin here. And as you can hear in the background, there's a certainly different ambience in the sound down here.
Oh yeah, you get the whine of the motor. It's not too bad actually, but it is a different sound to the wind power, that's for sure, yeah.
Well, that's it, because I suppose there's the authentic wind power. It makes this fantastic sound of rumbling and creaking, and the whine does kind of drown that out slightly.
It does a little bit,
It does.
I mean, normally under wind power you just get a rumble in the mill. You don't actually hear the sails, it's silent. You know. The old millers used to innovate all the time, but obviously things happen. Mills are strange beasts in a way. There's always things breaking on them. You always want them to do something that they can't do, so you innovate to actually make them do that.
And unlike, for example, Heckington Mill or Ellis Windmill in Lincoln, Mount Pleasant is a commercial enterprise. Without the white sail and the white cap and the white sails, people miss it. Is it affecting business?
Of course, yeah. We get less visitors now because it's just another stump, and there are lots of them in Lincolnshire. It loses its sort of attractiveness, if you like. Yeah. And of course, that affects our tourist trade. In the summer, we're normally packed. Because people want to see a windmill going round, you know. And now, unfortunately, that's not happening at the moment.
But there's good news on the horizon, am I right in thinking that?
Oh, yeah. Hopefully we're going to be up and running by the end of the summer. That's the plan, anyway. But a case of one step forward and two back sometimes, but, you know, we're getting there.
We return now to Heckington's 8-sailed windmill, or rather, the brewery that's attached to it. Brewers there say they're the only one in the country making beer with windmill ground barley. Tony Piggott established it in 2010 and was bottling up the latest batch when I dropped by.
Well, Steve's busy casking up the beer, which is the Fenman bitter, which is one of our traditional main bitters. That's almost finished, and I'm doing some bottling of it. So the cask you see up there has just come out of the fermenter. It's gravity fed into this reservoir, and then hand bottled.
And bottle.
Yeah.
And it smells glorious. Do you get used to the smell, or do you come home a bit tipsy after breathing it in all day?
The taste is better than the smell, usually.
What made you want to be a brewer?
30 years of teaching.
So,
that was enough.
and it's one of the few, I think probably one of the only breweries in the country that uses windmill ground rye, is that right? Or is it
Not so much rye, but barley.
barley?
They're using wheat most of the time for flour, but they've actually got the 2 stones set aside for our barley. And as far as we know, we launched it 2 years ago now, the Rolling Stone beer, and it's unique British-wide and even worldwide. We've not heard of any other brewery that uses a windmill for milling its grain. It's coarse enough for us to use,
Right.
and it makes a very good beer.
You're making a lot of beer, and it seems to be quite popular.
Well, we have a Friday night club here every week, and that seems to be very well attended and more popular every week. In fact, the last 2 weeks we've run out of beer by the end, so we know it's popular. We try and produce a range of between 9 and 15 different beers, so it's really a case of trying to juggle it more than anything.
Right. How many different types of beer do you actually make? Because I can see loads of different signs there for the pumps.
Well, that's the history of all the beers we've made in the past 7 years. So around about 50 different ones altogether. Can mix up the grain. There's many, probably hundreds, thousands of different combinations you could use of amounts of grain to build up the colour and the malt profile of the beer. There are many different hops you can use at different times you can put them in to get different flavours. So I would imagine with the nearly 2,000 different breweries in Britain, we could probably all produce unique beers. We'll do what we feel like doing and brew what we feel like brewing.
I think that's a reasonable thing. And
it's a big boy's toy, really.
I could talk about Lincolnshire's windmills for hours. In fact, I've already been doing so for about 45 minutes. But James Waterfield, the owner and miller at Maud Foster Mill in Boston, has literally written books on the history of windmills here. So I asked him whether Lincolnshire is particularly special.
Yes, it's got more windmills in working order than any other county. I think Norfolk has more preserved ones, but none of those are very well looked after these days. On a good day in Lincolnshire, I think we have 8 in working order now, although a few of them are out of action at the moment. Go back to about 1850, and approximately there were 600 wind-driven flour mills in the county, 300 wind-driven pumps. And Lincolnshire's famous because it's got big mills with lots of sails, like the 8-sailed mill at Heckington. Ours has 5, Sibsey has 6.
Were Lincolnshire people just a bit more experimental?
Yeah, and they're obviously showing off. The one at Heckington, for example, started life in Boston, and it was Tuxford's mill, and it was a real showpiece, and it was near where the docks are now, and I think it was just built to show off. But 5-sailed mills, there was a famous engineer called John Smeaton, who among other things built the Eddystone Lighthouse, and he built a test rig and worked out that 5 were the most efficient, which is true on a traditional mill. So there were quite a lot of those at one time. But the trouble with a 5-sailed mill, if you have a storm and you lose a sail like we did some years ago, you're out of commission till you mend it. Whereas a 6-sailed mill, you can take another one off and run it with 4 for a while. So 6-sailed mills are a bit more practical.
And the same with the 4, I suppose. Like Ellis Mill in Lincoln at the moment, it's just had 2 sails put on, and so it can still manage even though it's not got its other 2.
Yes, it'll run a bit lopsidedly because they don't like running with 2, but it will go.
It'll go, and I suppose that's the important thing. Was it the Industrial Revolution that kind of put paid to traditional windmills?
No, I think a mill like mine is a product of the Industrial Revolution, which I have to remember was a Georgian idea. Not most people think it's Victorian, but the Industrial Revolution was largely over by the time Queen Victoria came to the throne. So there was a lot of demand for small power unit machines like a windmill or a watermill. And in fact, the last one in Lincolnshire was 1880. The last one in England was 1892, which was built by a Lincolnshire firm. And they were a bit out of time, really. But for a lot of years, people would rather have a windmill than worry about having to look after a steam engine, which was the alternative. And it was really only the First World War and internal combustion that really finished off the windmill in Lincolnshire completely.
You mentioned earlier about Lincolnshire having so many windmills. Is it the sort of flat nature of the fens that meant that it was sort of special for that?
You couldn't build a watermill in Boston, for example, far too flat. There is a river, but there's not enough flow in the water or fall in the water to practically run a watermill. So if you want to grind flour, it's wind or nothing.
How are these windmills going to be preserved for future generations, and who's going to be doing it?
I think that's a real problem, actually. Neil Medcalf and Steve Bolton, who works with him, are really some of the few millwrights left in this country that know how working windmills work. There are lots of millwrights that can make mills look pretty, but to actually make them function is another thing altogether. So we're very lucky to have them. And yes, we're all middle-aged and we're not going to be practicing in 20 years' time probably. And who is going to do it in future, we'll see. I suspect there will be some young men and women that want to do it, but it is a problem at the moment. There's nobody really coming up over the horizon to rescue us all in the future.
Because Neil doesn't have an apprentice, and you don't have a miller's apprentice here either.
No, it's just, we're too busy really, and I'm afraid taking apprentices on takes an awful lot of time up, particularly when they start. And it really isn't an economical consideration for me, and I think Neil as well is so busy with Steve mending windmills, training somebody as well, I imagine will be quite difficult for him.
So hopefully some keen engineers of the future will be inspired by the windmills we have at the moment to try and learn a bit and take it over from the next generation.
Yeah, well, you would hope so. If they really want to do that, they need to learn how to be good carpenters and work with wood. And really, millwrights have to work with metal as well. So a first starting point would be to be a good joiner and carpenter. And then that would lead into the millwrighting world if they were that keen.
It's a tough job, though, isn't it? A lot of stairs. A tough job indeed. But James and his family have been milling in the Maud Foster for 30 years this year. And the mill is still open on a Wednesday and Saturday between 10 and 5 for visitors and if you want some flour. One person who regularly visits for that flour is baker Sonia Hundal. So is flour from a windmill better than shop-bought varieties? Let's chuck a log in the wood-burning oven and find out more.
The oven is 4.4 tonnes worth of French clay, and it comes as a kit shipped from France, but we'd had to have the floor reinforced to bear the weight of the oven.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a kit. You have to build a framework inside, and it's an igloo effectively, and then it's clad with chamotte, which is ground up clay, and then the brickwork is put on afterwards.
Why did you choose to do a wood-burning oven as opposed to just doing a standard electric/gas oven?
It was a crazy idea because I had to go on a course to learn how to use one of these things, and basically I've had to learn how to use it completely by myself because I don't know anyone else who's got one this size who uses it commercially in this country.
It's huge.
It's enormous.
You can just imagine that some celebrity chef might have one in his back garden or something like that.
But I have to say, mine is bigger than Jamie Oliver's, okay?
Fantastic. So just tell me what you've got here. We've got a big plastic tub full of what I assume is now proven dough.
This is dough after a long period of fermentation. So this is called a straight dough because it's mixed, fermented and baked on one day.
What flour is this? Because I can see that it's got kind of some kind of bran or something semolinery or something like that.
This is the wonderful flour from the Maud Foster Windmill in Boston.
People love the machines, the windmills, and we love looking inside them. Yeah. But is the product that they produce really that much better? Because obviously there's a premium on a stone ground flour. Yeah. Is it that much better?
Yes.
In short, that's good. Why?
You should know this from working at the mill. Stone ground flour is when the grain is milled, the flour is not heated by the process. In a roller mill, there's more friction and it's more intense, and it degrades the flour. When you buy flour from the supermarket, what you're getting is a product that's been made up from different batches of milled flour. So it's not what went in at the beginning. Everything that comes from the mill in Boston, there's nothing being added to it. You get exactly what you want with some of the big bits taken out. And it does affect the quality of the bread that comes out. I'm not saying that all roller mill flour is like the devil and you shouldn't use it, but if you have an opportunity to use flour that comes from a windmill, you should try it. And you're not paying for an elitist product. This is good solid food. You pay for good fruit and vegetables, you pay for good meat, and we live in a county where we produce these fantastic foods. Why wouldn't you want to eat them?
Why indeed. Now, we're almost at the end of the programme, but there's one last thing to do. Finish off putting those sails on Ellis Mill. Now, you may be able to hear in the background a kind of chinking sound. This is what's happening at the moment is they're hammering, or they've just finished hammering a kind of bolt through the sail, and he's got a massive wrench there to tighten the nuts on that bolt and put the sail on. So we've just seen the first sail go onto the mill. It's attached and it's screwed in place. Yeah, that's a very big wrench.
I'm Stuart Bristow.
And you're one of the volunteers here at Ellis Mill?
Yeah, that's correct, yes. A windmill that's not working is dead. It's a dusty old thing, you know. There's nothing better to hear the sails going around and it clunks and it clanks and it just gives it life.
And it's been without sails for so long, you know, over a year now for it to actually be working. It must be quite a exciting prospect for you to be thinking, we'll get it going again.
Oh yes, it is. You know, it'd be nice to make flour, because I mean, a windmill it's a living thing. You know, it's like a car that doesn't work. You know, it's just not the same.
It's sad, isn't it?
It is, very sad. But you know, we're pleased that the money's been found and it's got it's got made, and I'm sure it'll be super. You know, and what gets going again.
I'm Paul Frodsham, and I'm the secretary of the Ellis Mill group of volunteers.
So we've just seen the first sail put on. It's almost a lull. They're still tinkering with the nuts and bolts.
They are tightening it up, yeah.
How do you feel seeing it come back on? Because this has been sort of a labour of love for you as one of the chief volunteers.
It really is. It's good to see it happening.
But exciting now. So could you just help me? Because they've got... the millwrights are just currently tightening on two metal bands around the sail.
There's two shackles going on now. They'll put the two main bolts into the Lincolnshire cross, which is that cast iron cross with black we can see now. They've just put the two pins, or two bolts in, tighten them up, and now they're putting two shackles on and tightening that up at the back with big spanners, and that'll be the holding of the sail complete. I should guess they'll turn the whole thing round. They'll bring that sail down to the bottom, because at the moment we're looking at the top of it's 12 o'clock position, the sail at the moment. They'll bring that down to the 6 o'clock position and repeat the exercise for the second sail up at the 12 o'clock position. And then finally they'll connect up all the shades we see, that's the movable shades on each sail, to the centre so they can move.
It's quiet now, which is because the lorries, the trucks of engines are off, which means, I suppose, success.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've got two sails fitted. It all went relatively easy. We've had everything sort of prepared, ready for... So it went as well as it could have done. Couldn't have gone any better, really.
I mean, I've been standing here watching with fascination how kind of precise everything is. And you seem to have a kind of shorthand with your colleagues.
We've been doing this. I've been doing it for 30-odd years now. I've worked with Steve for years and years kind of thing. So we more or less know what each of us is thinking, you know. And it's just another job to us, really. You know, I mean, it is quite an impressive sight to see when the sails go on. So, yeah.
And that's the thing, because at one point in history, you know, there would have been about 9 windmills on top of Lincoln's Hill. Is that right?
I think there was about 9 along the stretch here, yeah. I mean, the wind always comes from the valley below kind of thing, so it's a perfect place to put a windmill, really, yeah.
How does it make you feel to know that you're kind of preserving this history of a site that's once had so many windmills?
It does make you feel good, you know. I mean, it's going to be here a lot longer than I am kind of thing, so I suppose I've left my mark sort of thing, yeah.
You must be one of so few people in the country who are able to do this sort of job.
There's not many of us at all kind of thing, you know. I think we are the only ones that have been traditionally taught. We travel all over the country.
And the world. You've been to Tasmania in the past,
yeah.
haven't you?
I built it was a Lincolnshire style windmill. You can always tell the style of the mill by the top kind of thing. Yeah, if you go much further than Tasmania, you start to come back, don't you? Really? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Who's going to be taking up the mantle of millwright? Have you got an apprentice, a young strapping lad who's able to take the business on?
No, I haven't. No, we haven't got any apprentices at all. We are just too busy, really, basically, to be employing an apprentice. Steve's got a young lad who, you never know, he might take over, but who knows, really.
So is it something that eventually you're going to have to consider, taking someone on?
Well, if we want to keep it going, yeah, we probably will do, really, yeah. So, yeah, just keep it going sort of thing, yeah.
Just because I suppose otherwise, the worry is if your generation of millwrights retires, and no one's there to take up the mantle, who's going to look after Ellis Mill and all of the wonderful windmills?
That is the trouble kind of thing. There's nobody to take over from us at the minute sort of thing. So it is definitely something to look forward to, in the future kind of thing, yeah.
A sad thought, but maybe you could be that miller of the future. Well, that's it from me, Harry Parkhill, and my special programme on the Windmills of Lincolnshire. Of course, there are more working flour mills in Lincolnshire than I could possibly feature in the programme. Moulton Mill near Spalding, Alford Mill, Sibsey Trader Mill, Burrilla Marsh Mill, Rawby Mill, Cogglesford Water Mill in Sleaford, and more. And of course, there are wind turbines generating electricity across our fine county. Maybe a subject for another programme.